Good morning. Welcome to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Craig Mish here with you with another edition of our show as we take a look back at the national championship in college basketball. The season is now complete. UConn wins another one. We'll get to that in just a minute. Gilbert McGregor, of course, will join us on the show, but there you go. That's the board. 75-60 was the final there. Give me a second. I'll get right to it. Also, coming up later in the program, we're going to preview the Masters. Folks, it is coming up on Thursday. And Brady Kannon will join us on the show. He's got a long list of potential wagers for you to consider coming up at Augusta on Thursday. Jim Gazzale from Legal Sports Report. Those are the guests that we have here on the show today. So now let's put a bow on the college basketball season. What an anticlimactic finish to the NCAA tournament. I thought the first 2 days of the tournament were wild, insane, and fun. And then after that, I mean, you just don't generally see this. The chalk goes right to the end. And UConn, the best team in the country, 2 years running. They win last night, 75-60. It was sort of close at the half. I believe UConn, I think, was up 3, if I'm not mistaken, at the half. But just basically, Purdue came out completely flat in the second half. It was Zach Edey and no one else. 61% of Purdue's total points for Edey. But meanwhile, the Huskies really get the story here. I mean, they were fantastic last night, and they win multiple titles. They now joined UCLA to do it in a 3-year run from 67 to 69. And they were, sort of incredible if you think about it, doing it in consecutive years. It's just an amazing feat for them. The Florida Gators, if I'm not mistaken, were the last team to win back-to-back championships there. UCLA did it 3 years in a row, 67, 68, and 69. Lou Alcindor and those guys at that time. Okay, now let's get to the women's college championship, which averaged 18.7 million viewers for their championship game. It was the most watched sporting event in the United States since football, World Cup, and Olympic numbers. That's it. That's where the women's college basketball championship ranked. An incredible performance by Caitlin Clark comes up short. South Carolina, of course, won the championship on Sunday night. Meanwhile, with reports going on with John Calipari potentially leaving Kentucky to go to Arkansas, Dan Hurley said yesterday his time is not up at UConn and he wants to stay with the Huskies. No doubt he's going to get a huge raise. We'll see how much that ends up. He would love to chase a third title, but probably would love to chase millions of dollars, a lot more, folks. That's the way that this works. Meanwhile, Duke and UConn open up as favorites to win the national title in 2025. And we'll see where that goes as time goes on. Over in the NBA, Trae Young is back for the Atlanta Hawks. He's cleared to practice. And this is 6 weeks after having pinky surgery. And he should be back over the next 10 to 12 days. The Hawks are 12-10 since his injury. And Atlanta, 36-42, hold the final play-in spot in the Eastern Conference and will play the Chicago Bulls in the play-in tournament. They're hoping to get him back for that play-in. If not, they're hoping to get him back for the next playoff series, or the Atlanta Hawks. But they'd love to have Trae, even a hurt Trae Young, I'm sure, play in the play-in game. All right, the NBA has fined the Knicks $25,000 for violating injury reporting news surrounding Mitchell Robinson in a matchup with the Toronto Raptors on March 27th. They listed Robinson as out on their initial injury report, and then he played in the game. 145-101 win over the Raptors marked Robinson's return from a 50-game absence due to an ankle injury. He played 12 minutes, scored 8 points. But if you say a guy is hurt, guy's got to actually be hurt and probably miss the game. So the Knicks are going to have to pay $25,000. All right, a lot more money going to Cedane Rafaela, nice young player for the Boston Red Sox. He gets a contract extension. Some are surprised it wasn't Tristan Casas, who also was in line for an extension. But Boston signs him to an 8-year, $50 million contract. Now, Rafaela is a very young player, so this buys out a lot of his arbitration years, gives him an extra year as well. And congrats to him, as certainly he'll be part of their outfield mix for the future. He's made some nice plays on defense, including saving a game against the Oakland A's on April the 2nd. All right, the Insane Game in Major League Baseball award goes last night to the San Diego Padres. They were down 8-0 to the Chicago Cubs. They won 9-8. It was the biggest comeback. It ties the biggest comeback in franchise history. Sort of an insane game when you think about it, because Yu Darvish got himself out of this game and thought probably he was in line for a loss, and they ended up getting a win. Fernando Tatis with the game winner 2-run home run, and walk-off last night. Excellent there. Now, the bad news continues in Major League Baseball. We have injury after injury going on, and there's another one now. This one is Framber Valdez, arguably the best pitcher on the Houston Astros. You saw him pitch, of course, in many a World Series, scratched from yesterday's start against the Rangers. They're saying all the right things, that it could potentially not be serious, but anytime it's an elbow, folks, it could be serious, and Valdez fronts that rotation, and Justin Verlander not back yet. So this would potentially be a tough injury and not one I don't think Houston can overcome. There ain't anybody out there. Also, their other pitcher, Jose Urquidy, hasn't even pitched for them this season. 12:30 p.m. game today. We got one game on the early slate. It is two really good teams, and the names are the Tigers and the Pirates. Yes, these two teams are off to great starts. 12:35 Eastern start for those of you over on FanDuel, DraftKings thinking of getting involved. Casey Mize, and Martin Perez. Those are the starters there. Okay, 24 hours away from getting ready and 48 hours away, a little bit under that, from tee-off at Augusta National. Bernard Langer looking to make a farewell tour at the Masters. That's going to have to wait. He has an injury to his Achilles playing pickleball. How about that? He's going to miss significant time, unfortunately. 40 Masters appearances for Langer. Won the Masters in 1985. Not going to be able to participate this year. Now, how about this story? This is crazy. Tyrrell Hatton, excellent golfer, going to, of course, play in the Masters. You probably know his name. His caddy, Mick Donaghy, took a tumble at a dinner in South Florida last weekend at a live golf event, and his caddy is going to miss the Masters. This is true. He fell. He's out for a month, and he's got to get a new caddy for the tournament. The guy's name is Hugo Dobson. I don't know if that's relevant at all, but regardless of that, you don't see that happen that often. Isaiah Thomas signs with the Phoenix Suns for the remainder of the season, his 12th NBA season. He had 2 10-day contracts with the Suns, and he joins them now for the rest of the year. And also, Austin Matthews becomes the 13th player in NHL history to score 65 goals in a season. So congrats to him as well. We got the NHL playoffs coming up. And, of course, we have the NBA playoffs coming up, too. We have the play-in games right around the corner, and Gilbert McGregor is going to talk about that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to let you know that you can download the SportsGrid app to learn more about all of our shows here. Just because March Madness is over, sports go on, folks. We got the Masters coming up this week. We got the Kentucky Derby in May. We got the NFL Draft. You want an edge on your sports betting, or just simply to learn more about all of our programming here? This is available for iOS and Android. It is the SportsGrid app. You can download it today. All right, we'll take our first time out of the show. Gilbert McGregor is up next. Did he have UConn last night winning the championship? How about his bracket? How about everybody's bracket? I think everybody went into last night rooting for UConn because so many people picked them to win. But how about that low-scoring game, right? 75-60. So did that match people to win a tiebreaker championship in the bracket? I don't think I won. I didn't get any notification that I won the SportsGrid bracket, so I guess I didn't. And also didn't pick UConn to win, so I'm out. All right, Gilbert's up next right here on NewsWire. Don't go away. Is it pretty much cut and dry that NC State is the biggest surprise of the weekend? I don't think anybody's bracket had the Wolfpack going this far.
I think they're going to find a way to keep this one close. And we all know Purdue's tournament history under Matt Painter. They've had a lot of early exits when they've been good teams, and maybe this is the time they'll exercise their demons. It's kind of like when Virginia lost to that 16-seed UMBC.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
The fact that I've been able to move to a home that I'm very excited about is it's really cool, and so far just love everybody that I've met at SportsGrid, and I'm just super pumped for the opportunity. Sometimes things that I wouldn't feel comfortable asking, whether it was me playing and just trying to get a tidbit on the golf course and certain thing a player might have learned. Now I'm getting that information because I don't mind asking it.
Only on SportsGrid.
89-87, 0.6 seconds remaining. Big drama here in this game. Always frustrating when your Final Four parlay and bracket gets busted, but here we go. I'm done.
Look what he is now. He's on FanDuel, plus 120. Almost even money to win the tournament. So you actually, if you did get him at plus 260, you got a pretty good, better investment than you had before. Just saying.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I know where Gilbert McGregor was last night at like 11:20 something Eastern, and that was putting his final bow on the college basketball season. I was not, Gilbert. I checked out of this game once I saw UConn, kind of floating through. At the half, I was like, I don't know, maybe this is going to be, an interesting final. But no, UConn did what they always do, which is find a way to just win and win big, and they did again last night, covering that spread, winning the championship. Gilbert, I heard, during the break, you guys don't get to see our conversations. Gilbert did have UConn winning it all, but he did not have the final score as close, I guess, is it fair to say somebody else in your bracket did, like in your competition? Is that fair?
It's fair to say. I think it's interesting because when you talk about predicting final scores, especially in a national championship game, it's not often as you predict a game to be a double-digit final or a deficit to close the game, but that just speaks to how dominant UConn was. So congratulations to everybody who won their brackets, especially those who were able to predict UConn's dominance, because it's somewhat unprecedented. So I think that's a big – we saw one of the best college seasons last night.
Yeah, we did. It was a fun tournament, I thought, until we got to like the 8 and the 4, and then it was a little dull for me. But let's go through some of the performances, and I'm sure that you could speak to like the NBA futures of these because you'll be covering it for the draft. I don't know who UConn's going to bring back at this point. I mean, winning back-to-back is incredible. 3 times in a row has only been done by UCLA. Tristan Newton, 20 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Castle had 15, 5, and 3. Spencer, 11, 8, and 2. And then, Klingon is going to be the name I'm sure we're talking about at the next level too. 11 points, 5 rebounds, 1 block. But, what's interesting about this, Gilbert, is that the NBA draft is very different than the others because you could have players that maybe aren't going to be superstars, but they still go in like the first round of the NBA draft because the pool is so thin. Do you see stars coming out of UConn here, or is this just more of a group effort and contributors in the future? What do you think?
It's an interesting question, especially given this year's draft, Craig. It's kind of gotten a bad rep even before the draft has rolled around. When I look at this UConn roster, it's 2 guys that stand out, and that's Stephon Castle and Donovan Clingan. Castle will likely go ahead of Clingan in this year's draft. He didn't necessarily have the best numbers, and he wasn't the most outstanding player of the tournament, but he projects to be the best pro with his size, his skill set. I don't necessarily know if he'll be a star player or an all-star, but you certainly can't rule that out because these guys are so young when they come out of college. I think that's the other thing that makes the NBA draft so unique. teams can kind of mold them and shape them into the players that they want to be. But Donovan Clingan has been the guy who has gotten all the headlines because of how dominant that he's been defensively. What he did in that Illinois game is something unlike we've seen from very many college basketball players, specifically from the center position. For him to be 7'2 plus, some say he's taller than 7'2, for him to kind of have a feel around the basket and make up for maybe a lack of being an out of this world athlete, but his timing around the rim, the way he can defend, that will translate to the next level immediately. So I can see a number of NBA teams going out of their way to get a player like that, because we see it's a common thread among successful NBA teams. They have defensive anchors on the inside, and Clingan can be that guy.
Yep. And Zach Edey, no question, that's going to be the big topic, I think, of all these players in the upcoming NBA draft. I mean, he was incredible last night, 37 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks. But, the rest of the team just, gosh, am I too harsh saying they didn't show up? I mean, these are kids. Braden Smith, 12 points, 8 rebounds. Was that it for double digits from this team? Or was Edey and Smith the only 2 double-digit players on Purdue last night? Is that right?
That's it. And that's a comment to dominance. Again, the dominance of UConn defensively. What they were able to do to just play one-on-one with Zach Edey. I think throughout the season, Purdue's players have been able to benefit from the fact that Edey draws so much attention. They get a lot of great looks, and they're able to take advantage of. Obviously, they got to the national championship because of the ability to do that. But you saw Zach Edey put up big numbers because he really was playing one-on-one, but they shut everybody else down. In addition to him scoring 37 of their 60 points, the rest of the team was 9 of 29 from the field outside of Zach Edey. And that was going to be the key for them to have an opportunity to at least hang around with UConn to have a chance to play at the end. But, you hate to kind of rag on him, and you hate to call him the others, but the guys around him, his supporting cast, weren't able to play and support him the way that they had all season. They are a very good team. They were a very deserving national runner-up, but they just were outmatched and would have needed some out-of-body experiences from those other guys to be able to keep up with Connecticut.
Yep, agreed. All right, so now let's close out college basketball with the story that overshadowed somewhat of the day, I think, until we got to the night. I mean, what are they thinking here with this Calipari stuff? Couldn't this have waited until today? I mean, come on. I mean, isn't there some sort of rule where you don't want to take the limelight away from these kids? I guess Coach Calipari doesn't care about that. I saw him walking his dog yesterday. Reporters trying to ask him, hey, are you leaving? Are you leaving Kentucky? You going to Arkansas? I think what's interesting, Gilbert, as a journalist, is seeing a story like this happen, and then we're still sort of waiting here for some confirmation on this. He's going to leave. He's going to coach. I know that, but we haven't heard from Arkansas yet on the subject. And it does give me some pause, I guess, that the way that it came out and the fact that we haven't heard anything. I'm probably just a conspiracy theorist, but what do you make of this if it ends up happening?
You know what, Craig? I understand, because it's kind of hard to imagine Calipari leaving Kentucky after being there for 15 seasons now. And the way that we found out the news, it was a little bit of smoke, and then it quickly became a big fire that Sunday night. Again, the eve of the national championship game, and is really surprising, something you don't expect to see. But when you start thinking about it, it does make a little sense. You think about Kentucky and their expectations for their basketball program after losing in the first round this year. There seemed to be a bit of unrest, with Coach Cal and the job that he's done at Kentucky in recent years. He sent a lot of guys to the NBA. He's produced a lot of lottery picks, a lot of number 1 overall picks, but they haven't made it past the first weekend since 2019. And if there's one thing I know about Kentucky basketball fans, they want much more than that. He did win the national championship in 2012, and it's hard to just win one of them. But I think the goodwill from that championship that came 12 years ago is starting to wear off a little bit. And I think that, I think the fan base getting a little uneasy, and what you hear from the fan base that's uneasy, you might want a new beginning. And I think Arkansas certainly backed up the Brinks truck in this age of NIL. Coach Calipari can recruit well wherever he is. So I think it'll be fruitful for all parties involved. And I think ultimately it was probably time to move on.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, real quick, let's get to the NBA play-in games here. Now, I was reading this morning, that Trae Young is coming back, and then I, read a little bit more, and then I saw, maybe not even back in time for this play-in game, maybe in time for a playoff series, because just being cleared to practice doesn't mean necessarily can play in the game. So I guess I'm a little bit confused with a timeline here for Trae Young. I'm a little bit more confused, Gilbert, how the NBA thinks it's a good idea to have play-in games with teams that are 6 games under 500. Come on. Like, shouldn't you be like close to 500? I mean, I love the play-in, Gilbert. Come on, man. Like, I mean, we can't even get good teams playing in this. But all right, regardless of that, I would assume that he's going to mean a lot to that club. They can't go anywhere without him, right?
Absolutely not. And to your point, I think it's interesting. They might maybe tweak things moving forward. Maybe you have to have a certain record threshold to play in the play-in tournament. But when it comes to the Hawks and Trae Young, a team that's actually been a perennial play-in tournament team, he's played really well on that stage. And it's the closest thing that we get to the NCAA tournament. So if the Hawks are able to beat the Bulls because they're locked into that matchup and they play, one of the Pacers or the 76ers or the Heat, Trae Young is the type of player that can make 7 or 8 threes in a game and in a one-off situation can upset a team. So I think his return could be huge for the Hawks to maybe surprise some teams and sneak back into the playoffs like they did last year.
Yeah, and next week it all begins. Let's end with the Eastern Conference. We know the top 6 teams: Boston, Milwaukee, Orlando, New York, Cleveland, and Indiana. Gilbert, the Final 4: Philly, Miami, Chicago, Atlanta. Isn't it interesting that the Heat's still hanging around here?
I think so. You could never count them out, as we learned last year. And if they move up in the standings or if they stay where they are, they have a chance to go far.
Yeah, they do. All right, Gilbert, we'll break it all down next week. Thanks for coming on.
Good job.
I mean, is it pretty much cut and dry that NC State is the biggest surprise of the weekend? I mean, I don't think anybody's bracket had the Wolfpack going this far.
I think they're going to find a way to keep this one close. And we all know Purdue's tournament history under Matt Painter. They've had a lot of early exits when they've been good teams, and maybe this is the time they'll exercise their demons. It's kind of like when Virginia lost to that 16 seed UMBC.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
The fact that I've been able to move to a home that I'm very excited about is it's really cool, and so far just love everybody that I've met at SportsGrid, and I'm just super pumped for the opportunity. Sometimes things that I wouldn't feel comfortable asking, whether it was me playing and just trying to get a tidbit on the golf course and certain thing a player might have learned. Now I'm getting that information because I don't mind asking it.
Only on SportsGrid.
89-87, 0.6 seconds remaining. Big drama here in this game. Always frustrating when your Final Four parlay and bracket gets busted, but here we go. I'm done.
Look what he is now. He's on FanDuel, plus 120. Almost even money to win the tournament. So you actually, if you did get him at plus 260, you got a pretty good, better investment than you had before. Just saying.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Jim Gazzale is with us. We're going to talk about some updated news in the state of Vermont as far as sports betting is concerned. Jim also has a horse racing story for us, as he always does as we close in on the Kentucky Derby. But, Jim, let's start off with the NCAA tournament. It is great to have you back on, and to no surprise, looks like almost $1 billion wagered in the, is this right, in the state of New York during the NCAA tournament. And by the way, this is what I would like. This is my surprise to you, I would tell you. I'm not surprised that $539 million was wagered in the first week of the NCAA tournament. This does not even look like a huge drop-off in the Sweet 16 to get to the Final Four. I guess that's my biggest surprise, Jim. I'm wrong. I thought that a lot of people would check out after that first weekend of the NCAA tournament, but it appears that people, the fever for this continued.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind too that these are whole numbers that take into account all of sports betting on everything that's available in New York, not just March Madness. But we have to assume that these figures are large. A large part of these figures is March Madness. Just given the time frame, not a lot else going on the sports betting calendar. But yeah, you're right. I mean, these are pretty big numbers, and March as a whole was one of the highest volume months in New York sports betting history, which I feel like I say just about every single month when I come on here and talk about New York with you, Craig. But yeah, that first week of the tournament, $539.6 million in overall sports betting handle. That second weekend of the tournament, $456.4 million. Overall, March handle an increase over last year, certainly driven in large part by the NCAA basketball tournament. And we've seen this in a variety of other states as the sports betting markets start to mature. We had that that record-setting end to last year, where Craig, like I said, it just seemed like every week I was coming on here talking about a new handle record, a new revenue record, and New York is certainly the leader in that arena. A couple other interesting little tidbits from the March report in New York. Caesars had 10% of overall online handle in March. That marks 2 out of 3 months to start the year here where they've had a double-digit market share. I know they were on a little bit of a downward trend towards the end of last year, so a bit of a holding steady with a little bit of an uptick to start the year here. And the other thing that I found pretty interesting, I remember talking about this with you, Craig, a couple of weeks ago. Fanatics, they had their first full month as Fanatics Sportsbook in New York in March.
Right.
Prior to that, they were still operating as PointsBet. They made that transition over in February. But interestingly enough, at least to me, in March, $53.2 million in overall handle for Fanatics, which was down from $82.9 million in February. They were sending out what felt like a gazillion different emails letting you know in February that they were transitioning over to Fanatics from PointsBet. So perhaps that enticed people to hop on the app and wager, but about a $30 million drop off in handle for Fanatics in their first full month operating as Fanatics Sportsbook in New York in March.
Okay, now let's stay a little bit in the Northeast. Let's talk about Vermont and the sports betting applications coming in. And Jim, tell us more about these applicants and this scoring system that's involved. I know Mike Mazzio posted this the other day. I was not personally aware that this is how they grade whether or not sports books are ready to operate in their state. Seeing some scores coming in from FanDuel and DraftKings, Fanatics. What is this based on?
Yeah, so it was based on a variety of different factors. The overall sort of company standing in the marketplace, ethics, how much revenue you can produce, things of that nature, really. And in Vermont, it's a fairly unique structure that they basically had five operators, 5 different potential apps go through this application process. They had 4 staff in Vermont, 4 regulators that graded each application on this scoring system, and they awarded these licenses to 3 sports books, FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fanatics. BetMGM and Penn for their ESPN Bet app did not get awarded licenses. And again, like I said, this is a bit of a unique approach for awarding sports betting licenses for states. When I was speaking to Vermont regulators, I feel like I've spoken to them a bunch over the last couple of weeks. BetMGM, the revenue structure that they submitted in their application did not meet the criteria that Vermont regulators wanted. It was a bit of a revenue share arrangement that increased with the number of apps and operators that Vermont regulators allowed into the state, and that was basically a non-starter for regulators. Penn, the regulators told me that their application was a total non-starter, materially non-compliant, as they put it. Missed 3 key criteria. And I was speaking to a source about this who had knowledge of Penn's application for that ESPN Bet app. And he was telling me that there are some, pretty simple things that they just overlooked or omitted. And just to be fair to Penn and ESPN Bet, as this application process was going on, Penn was migrating to its own tech stack, which is a massive undertaking. They were preparing for the Kentucky sports betting launch, which happened in September, and they were also in that rebrand phase from Barstool to that ESPN Bet app. So my source told me that it was likely that all of these other things going on was likely just a bit of an oversight on Penn's team in that application submission process. One more quick note about Vermont, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, Craig. The eclipse yesterday, traffic was crazy up here in upstate New York, right over the border from Vermont. Burlington was in the path of totality, as they call it. So I know that the regulators there were telling me that they saw a bunch of tourists around the popular ski weekends throughout the winter playing on the sports betting apps, and they were expecting a large influx of handle and out-of-state bettors for the eclipse weekend. I checked in with them yesterday. No numbers available just yet, but they're expecting to have some figures for me by the end of the week. So we'll continue our streak of talking about Vermont sports betting, most likely next week, once I got my hands on those numbers and can digest them and then share them with you.
All right. Hopefully they were wearing glasses yesterday watching the eclipse. That's my hope with them. Okay, so you wouldn't be here on the show, Jim, if we didn't have a horse racing story here. We end with the future of horse racing in Maryland. Now, this is a topic all around the country as to whether or not it will continue in some places. Triple Crown Challenge still going strong. But certainly when you talk about Maryland, you're talking about Pimlico. You're talking about the Preakness here. So, I mean, is it possible even to think that the Triple Crown would not be in Pimlico at some point? That would be crazy.
Yeah, and that was the discussion for the better part of the last couple of years. What would happen to the Preakness Stakes in Maryland? Would it continue to be held at Pimlico, which is a very old structure in need of a lot of repairs, or would the Preakness get moved to another track in Maryland, Laurel Park, both owned by the same company? But a bill passed last night in the Maryland legislature kind of gives us a little bit of a clearer path, a clearer vision for the future of horse racing in Maryland. So what's going to happen now, once the governor signs this bill into law, the Stronach Group and First Racing, which owns a handful of tracks around the U.S., including Pimlico, Laurel Park, also in Maryland, Santa Anita Park out in California, and Gulfstream Park in southern Florida. So they're Maryland tracks, Pimlico and Laurel. They're going to transfer those over to the state of Maryland, who's going to create a nonprofit entity to operate day-to-day racing at these tracks. Pimlico is going to get a big facelift to the tune of $300 to $400 million in renovations to keep the Preakness in Baltimore at Pimlico. And what I think the state is going to do, this nonprofit entity is then going to license the Preakness from First Racing for about $3 million annually, and then a portion of betting handle on that race. So as far as we can tell right now, the Preakness is going to stay in Maryland and maintain that ever popular Triple Crown in horse racing.
Yeah, can't wait for it all to begin. All right, Jim, have a great rest of your week. We'll check back with you next week here on NewsWire. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, Jim Gazzale from Legal Sports Report. Brady Kannon's up next with a Masters preview. Stay on the grid. I mean, is it pretty much cut and dry that NC State is the biggest surprise of the weekend? I mean, I don't think anybody's bracket had the Wolfpack going this far.
I think they're going to find a way to keep this one close. And we all know Purdue's tournament history under Matt Painter. They've had a lot of early exits when they've been good teams, and maybe this is the time they'll exercise their demons. It's kind of like when Virginia lost to that 16-seed UMBC.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
The fact that I've been able to move to a home that I'm very excited about is it's really cool, and so far just love everybody that I've met at SportsGrid, and I'm just super pumped for the opportunity. Sometimes things that I wouldn't feel comfortable asking, whether it was me playing and just trying to get a tidbit on the golf course and certain thing a player might have learned, now I'm getting that information because I don't mind asking it.
Only on SportsGrid.
89-87, 0.6 seconds remaining. Big drama here in this game. Always frustrating when your Final Four parlay and bracket gets busted, but here we go. I'm done.
Look what he is now. He's on FanDuel, plus 120. Almost even money to win the tournament. So you actually, if you did get him at plus 260, you got a pretty good, better investment than you had before. Just saying.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. I can't wait for the Masters Thursday. It's a ton of fun. And with that, let's get a preview of this year at Augusta with Brady Kannon, who is all dressed up for the event and dressed up for the affair. He's already won. he's got his green jacket on. But look, Brady, this is every year that sports betting is legal here in the United States is going to be a bigger year to bet on the Masters. Let's get real. There's always going to be more options than ever on FanDuel, DraftKings, MGM, everywhere else. I know you live in Las Vegas, so a lot of them have been available for you. But I kind of am of the belief, maybe I'm crazy, is that because of all of these extra options available on the online market, that Las Vegas sort of has to counter now and hey, if they have all these options, we got to have even more. I know the Superbook, I'm sure, has as many as you can ask for. But I think that's what makes this so much fun is there is, like the Super Bowl, always a bet out there for someone.
Yeah, you're right, Craig. And I was browsing around a number of the different apps on Monday, and, the top 10s and the top 20s are up there. And then they've also got, some proposition bets, the highest live finisher and, the nationality markets, and will there be a hole in one? So it's much different than a standard tournament where you see the FanDuels of the world and DraftKings and, what have you with first round leader and all those different options. Well, now all the brick and mortar casinos out here in Las Vegas, they come forward with all of that stuff as well, which they typically do not have on a week to week basis. But this is the Super Bowl. This is the biggest golf betting event of the entire year. And my friend Jeff Sherman at the Superbook told me recently that the Masters garners 10 times the amount of typical handle than just the other majors, not a regular tour event, but 10 times the amount of the other major championships as well. So this is a biggie indeed.
Yeah, and I would say that what makes it more fascinating now, as opposed to maybe several years ago, is the fact that all of the players on the PGA Tour are now joined, of course, by the Live Golf Tour as well, which would include last year's champion in Jon Rahm, who is not the favorite to win this year. He's 11-1. Scotty Scheffler is about the shortest Masters favorite that I can recall, as we've talked about, maybe since Tiger Woods at 4-1. There's Rory McIlroy at 10-1. Xander's 14-1. Hideki Matsuyama seems to always show up for this one in Augusta, 20-1. Brooks Koepka in the mix here at 22-1 as well. So, Brady, this usually is a tournament, if memory serves me right, where one of the favorites is going to be in that final grouping on Sunday, walking to 18. But there's always somebody surprising, whether it's an amateur or somebody that kind of goes out of nowhere, maybe not to necessarily win the Masters, but like a Phil Mickelson, who you don't expect to be there, that is in that final grouping. So let's sort of touch on who you think the winner will be, and then maybe who one of the long shots who will be there in the end could be.
Well, I tell you what, Craig, your memory does serve you well, because this is typically a pretty chalky tournament. In the last dozen years or so, the only triple-digit long shot we've seen win this thing was Charles Schwartzel, who is now a member of the Live Tour. But you're right. I mean, 40-1 and less, even, 15-1. I think Jon Rahm last year was about 8-1 pre-tournament. So, yeah, it typically the cream rises to the top. But you're also right in saying that we see some long shots, dabble in the lead a little bit. We had Sam Bennett, the amateur last year, that was turning heads for a minute. I think he ended up finishing 16th, but a top 20 finish nonetheless. For one of those outliers, if you will. And maybe Akshay Bhatia is that guy this year at 100-1, coming off of that win last week at the Valero Texas Open. He really has the game for this type of golf course. He's got a great short game. He's got a great long game. He plays good irons. And, every major championship takes a little bit of everything. But Augusta National, it demands that you be pretty long off the tee. It is an absolute big boy golf course, now stretched out to over 7,550 yards. So you've got to hit it long. The irons have to be exquisite. And then you have to have an absolute magical short game. And very few people on the planet check all of those boxes. And, John Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Jordan Spieth, Brooks Koepka, those are the type of guys that have that rare combination. And that's why you typically get, a chalk or a favorite winning this event. But you're right. As far as an outlier, I said Batia maybe. One guy that's not such a long shot, but maybe is not on everybody's radar this year. And I think one of the reasons is because he's moved over to the live circuit, and that's Joaquin Niemann. Niemann is a guy that I played this year at 31-1. I've seen him as high as 32. I've seen him a little lower. 30-1 is probably about the consensus price, but I think he is a little off the radar because he's not a regular on the PGA Tour anymore. I'll tell you, one of the correlated courses this week is Riviera, where they play the Genesis Invitational. We've seen an incredible number of crossover winners at both the Masters and Riviera, and also the Plantation course at Kapalua, where they start the year for the Century. Also another course where we see a ton of crossover success. Well, Joaquin Niemann in 2022, when he was still a member of the PGA Tour, won at Riviera, probably still the biggest win of his career to date. And also, it was in that same year that he lost in a playoff at Kapalua and has finished 5th there as well. He's very long. He has the great short game. He has the great iron play. He has all the necessary qualities here. He's also got a progressively better timeline, if you will, for what he's done at Augusta National. In his first year playing the Masters, he finished 69th. In his second year, he finished 40th. In his third year, he finished 35th. And in his fourth year, last year, he finished 16th. So he keeps getting progressively better. He's won twice already this year on the live circuit, won the Australian Open. I think he is primed to be a contender absolutely this week. And not necessarily a long shot to golf enthusiasts, but for the casual observer, he might be that guy this year that people weren't expecting.
Yeah, no, and I like the strategy here, and I guess I would ask a little bit further on some of these top 10 and top 20 finishes, because Brady, it's like I kind of have a feeling that a lot of people are on the apps on FanDuel and DraftKings, and they're going to look at a lot of golfers this week, and they're going to click on top 20 finishers, and they're going to see some minus 120s, minus 130s, depending on who the player is. And I know that you dabble in that market and are very successful, and you also dabble in the top 10 market. And to me, that is the question here, is that I think people are scared off a little bit by thinking that their player that they want to bet on is not going to finish in the top 10. So they're willing to pay more juice a little bit to finish in the top 20. Do you think that that is a good strategy? Because generally speaking, if you're that close to the top 20, does it always mean that you're, peeking in on the top 10? Which way would you go in that stage?
It's a good question, Craig. And it comes down to the number, like it always does. But personally, I feel a lot more comfortable taking a top 20 bet. That gives you double the amount of possibility. Yes, you have to pay a little bit more, but you can find some very good players in this field at plus money prices for a top 20 finish. I played 7 guys this week for an outright win. I played one of them for a top 10, and I played the rest of them for a top 20, and all but one of them were at plus money. I played Jordan Spieth to win this week. I took a number that was not as great anymore. It was a good number at the time. I got 22-1. He's closer to 24 or 25 at the time, currently. And to finish top 20, I got him at minus 115. So not too bad, but everybody else I played was at plus money. The one top 10 I took was Xander Schauffele. And I didn't play him top 20 because he was all the way to minus 175. I didn't want to lay that. So I went top 10 with him and got plus 125. I've seen plus 135. And Xander, out of all the guys, may be the most likely candidate to finish top 10. He's got 6 top 10 finishes this year. He has multiple top 10 finishes at Augusta, including a runner-up. So out of all the guys on my list, I think he was the one I decided I'll go ahead and trim the possibility there in half and take the top 10 rather than the top 20. It's a very interesting tournament. There are only 89 players in the field. A debutante, a first-timer, has not won this tournament since 1979. Then you have the former champions like Fred Couples and Vijay Singh, who are probably not going to win it either. I mean, when you just cut to the chase here, there are probably really only about 35, maybe 40 guys at the most can win this. And some might argue it's 25 or 30. So really, it can be one of the easier tournaments to pick a winner, or especially a top 20 finish, when you figure that field of 89 players is really cut in half. Now, you can't bet all of them, so you have to pick 6, 7, 8 guys, whatever it is, out of that 35 or 40. And, that's much different than picking a few guys out of a normal PGA Tour event where there's probably over 100 guys that can win.
Okay, fair enough. Now let's get to Tiger Woods. Everyone's waiting for this conversation, Brady. So with Tiger Woods, barring a setback, he's going to play. And usually in the last few years of the Tiger Woods playing era, within 2 hours of it beginning, we know whether or not he's going to make the cut. He's going to be a factor. And I don't know if that's a fair assessment of Tiger at this point, but it sure feels like it, Brady. It feels like his health is just so critical to making it to the weekend. I don't know. Is there a handicap here with anything with Tiger Woods, or is it just stay away? There's better things to play.
I'm probably going to stay away, Craig. I mean, you could bet him to miss the cut. I think he's pretty close to a pick 'em to make the cut, which is kind of surprising. And maybe that's the books just protecting himself or themselves because they know, the majority of the bets are going to come on anything positive for Tiger. Anything positive happening for Tiger is where the majority of the bets are going to come in. I know the Superbook already has liability on him to win the darn thing, which is a little crazy. You talk about seeing the first couple hours of action and being able to determine his health or his probability of having any success. He has had to withdraw from 3 of the last 6 events he's played. That's kind of sad and it's unfortunate, but it's also reality. And we could possibly see it again here. I have seen a head-to-head matchup with Phil Mickelson, which is pretty interesting. Phil Mickelson, a slight favorite in that head-to-head over Tiger. But I'm going to stay away because, I think there's a lot of unknown. I think he probably, if he stays healthy enough and sticks around for 4 days, he probably has a decent chance to make the cut because he knows this property so well. And there's no other course on tour where course history is as strong. And we saw that in 2019 when the guy went on to win the darn thing. So I'll probably just stay away. Hope he does make it around for the weekend. And even while he will not admit it, Craig, I think making the cut for Tiger is a win.
All right. Well, enjoy, Brady. Thanks for the great breakdown. Good luck with all your positions, and we'll catch up again soon. Thanks for coming on.
Have fun, Craig. Thank you.
We'll be back to wrap it up next. Is it pretty much cut and dry that NC State is the biggest surprise of the weekend? I mean, I don't think anybody's bracket had the Wolfpack going this far.
I think they're going to find a way to keep this one close. And we all know Purdue's tournament history under Matt Painter. They've had a lot of early exits when they've been good teams, and maybe this is the time they'll exercise their demons. It's kind of like when Virginia lost to that 16-seed UMBC.
NewsWire, only on SportsGrid.
The fact that I've been able to move to a home that I'm very excited about is it's really cool, and so far just love everybody that I've met at SportsGrid, and I'm just super pumped for the opportunity. Sometimes things that I wouldn't feel comfortable asking, whether it was me playing and just trying to get a tidbit on the golf course and certain thing a player might have learned. Now I'm getting that information because I don't mind asking it.
Only on SportsGrid.
89-87, 0.6 seconds remaining. Big drama here in this game. Always frustrating when your Final Four parlay and bracket gets busted, but here we go. I'm done.
Look what he is now. He's on FanDuel, plus 120. Almost even money to win the tournament. So you actually, if you did get him at plus 260, you got a pretty good, better investment than you had before. Just saying.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on SportsGrid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. There have been a rash of injuries in Major League Baseball, predominantly to starting pitchers, a rash of Tommy John surgeries over the last couple of years, and it just keeps getting worse. A lot of the game's top pitchers are out. I mean, Spencer Strider is hurt. Yuri Perez had Tommy John surgery yesterday. Justin Verlander, by the way, had Tommy John surgery a couple of years ago to get back healthy before he signed with the New York Mets, and he weighed in on some of the issues in baseball.
I don't know, man. It's tough. I think the game has changed a lot. I think it'd be easiest to sit here and blame the pitch clock. I think in reality, you put everything together, and everything has a little bit of influence. I think the biggest thing is the style of pitching has changed so much. Everybody's throwing as hard as they possibly can and spinning the ball as hard as they possibly can. And, it's hard to deny those results. Obviously, how can you? It's a double-edged sword. How can you tell somebody to go out there and not do that when they're capable of throwing 100? And this young guy comes up and throws a pitch 95 and gives up a big homer, and everybody's like, "What the hell, man?" So something needs to change.
Yeah, very tough situation right now in baseball because, again, pitching is so important to the game, and the contracts that are given out to some of these pitchers, as you can see from the offseason, are also incredible. But the question is, eventually, will teams stop paying starting pitching because of fear of injury? And if that is the case, you have a major issue on your hands in baseball because, again, part of the lifeline for the players, their families, the agents are getting paid. And if they're not able to get the mega contracts because of injuries or potential injuries, I don't know what the answer is, but they got to come up with something. Thanks again to everyone for watching the show today. Again, thanks to all of our guests on the program. Also, thanks to our associate producer, Frank. Also, thanks to John Grill for helping out in the show today. And thanks to our producer, Michael Cohen. I'm Craig Mish. Early Lines coming up next, followed by Coast to Coast at 3 o'clock Eastern. Have a great day.